They start to smell, and everybody's sitting in the back. Just never know. There. Like 10 minutes before you actually pass it along to the next person. Whatever that Okay, so today's a homework checking day. So if you could pull out your homework, it would be homework number 3. It was one of the handouts, and page 2 of homework number 2. And here's the way we do it. Okay, so in this case, I was looking for that. Okay, so I'm not, but I don't, so what I would like to do when we look at it, these are all correct. Those are great. However, I was trying to get to this one. Okay, yeah, but nonetheless, you did it. So there you go. So put your name, the date. Today is the 8th, and I'll tell you the number. So we put a number 1 on there. And okay, you should do the same with the number 1 and the number 1 and the number 1. I'll come back. Okay, so what I was looking for is the old one, right? There was a new one, this one. I'll give you credit for that one. Oh, you didn't do it. Okay. One there. Just a big old 1 in there anyway. It doesn't matter at all. And then electronic. All right. The other one. You got the other one electronic too? You are the person. I can't say you're the man because that work. Gold. Is it real gold? Oh, bummer. Oh, wait a minute. Okay. So we're going to go over these. So watch what I do on there. I was looking to get the whole word. But hang on. Let's see. Looks like a 1 for you, a 1 for you also. And a 1 for you, a 1 for you. Name date and a 1. Got it? Little 1. And then would be number 3 and page 2 of this one. The name date and a 1. What I do is multiply 1 times as 100%. Otherwise, sometimes I'll give you less than that if you only do a partial. Fill that out. I'll come along and pick them up on this end. And so take yours, and you can hand that to me there. I'm going to grab it over here. Did I give you one? Do you have one? There you go. Very good. And then, all right. All right, so I want to go through these real quick. This is probably the only time I'm going to really sit here and work on the distinctive feature set for each one of the vowels. But we will have a similar worksheet to kind of fill in partial on the first part of the midterm, as I talked about before. So looking at these, I'm going to pull the key up here. And as you remember, we said vowels have 4 characteristics. We use those 4 characteristics to identify vowels. The first one tends to be the height of your tongue. Is it high? Is it in the middle? Or is it low? The second one tends to be how far to the front is it? Is it in the front or is it in the back? Then we look at whether it's tense or lax. And then we look to see if your lips are rounded or spread. So in this particular case, we look at the E sound. E, right? It is the I with a lowercase I, and it is plus high, plus front, plus tense, minus round. Now, if I wanted to do something here instead of minus round, what could I have put? Plus spread. Very good. Same thing. It looks very much the same here. High, front, minus tense, which could also be plus lax, and minus round, which could have been plus spread. Now, I did this so that you can see that it's okay to do pluses and minuses if you want to, but I personally find it a lot easier for myself, for me, to go in there and just mark everything with pluses, if I can. Occasionally, you might have to put in a negative for some reason, but normally I wouldn't. So over here, we've got high still, right? Because this whole thing was the high row. Now, though, we've moved from being plus front to plus back. We've moved, well, we're still plus tense. Remember, the thing on the top of the diagonal will be tense if there is one, and it's plus round. And over here, the only thing difference was we changed from tense to lax, right? All making sense? Remember to put these inside square brackets, because you want to do that. That way it shows that it is an entire group. Homework? Yep. Okay, everybody got their name on? All right. All right, so the next thing we can do is we can move down. And if we move down, we're going to move to those that are plus mid. And so, as I said, I like to use pluses. So mid, front, tense, spread, mid, front, lax, spread. Only difference is that. When we get over here, we have two sounds, right? Or no, actually, I shouldn't say that. We have one sound but two symbols. What are the two symbols that go in there? The schwa. How do you draw a schwa? Upside down E, very good. And the other one is called the wedge, and it's the upside down V, right? We'll talk a little bit later. Well, we'll talk about it now. In the case of a V, it's usually because it's a purposeful sound, like in onion, onion. The schwa is much shorter, and it's usually a substitute vowel for something else. For instance, if I say the word syringe, I could say syringe, but nobody does. We all say syringe. That second sound in there, the very short one, is the schwa. Now, I've said before, I don't get too tied up or too hung up on whether you use a wedge or a schwa, but it is kind of important. For instance, I don't know, did I tell you the story? I had a niece who was here living with us studying English. And you know, you could walk into the room and you say, "How are you?" Sounds perfectly fine, right? "How are you?" And I would say that. And she would say, "I'm fine. How are you?" Now, the first one is a schwa. And the second one would probably be the wedge, because it sounds a little different. But doesn't that sound a little funny? "How are you?" And it took me years to figure out why was that funny. Well, the schwa, the upside down E, is almost always in a very low stress or unstressed syllable. If, on the other hand, you've got something like uncle, it's the same, but the stressed syllable is that first one. We would typically use the wedge. So what she was doing is she didn't realize that the in there was because it was an unstressed syllable. When I would go, "How are ya?" she would say, "How are ya?" And it just sounds really weird. So it's a pronunciation thing that your students have to kind of get used to. It's kind of like the difference between saying syllable and syllable, right? I mean, it's got the same basic sounds in there, but syllable as opposed to syllable. And it sounds strange when you do it. Okay, so yes, were you raising your hand? Well, they're not really interchangeable. And if you go in and you look up the word uncle, for instance, in a learner's dictionary, you'll see this one. But if you looked up something like about, the first one would be this. From my perspective, I know it's kind of difficult to really tell the difference, so I don't get hung up about it. Give me one or the other. Either one's going to work for me. Okay? I did see a homework today that was kind of interesting. They put in both. And so they put in the and the schwa. You don't need both. It's only one or the other. And the most common thing that you'll ever find, the most common vowel sound in English is the schwa, the very short substitute of. But I won't grade you off one way or the other, okay? Let's see. Now, did you have homework? Did you bring your homework? 3 and 2? Yeah. Okay, cool. So there was the homework. There you go. There you go. Now, notice one thing. You did what many other people did. You put in the symbol here. What I was really looking for in this particular case were the distinctive features. So you want to make sure maybe you go back in there and do it real quick for yourself and put it into this format. Okay? So here we are in the middle. We're in the middle, we're in the back, we're lax. Both the and the schwa are lax sounds. They're both spread. And then here we have the O, mid-back tense, O with rounded lips. Down here we've got something a little different. And it's the aw sound, as in awful. Still tense, still back, still round. But the thing that's different here is that it's low. The ah sound, plain old ah. And we have the add. Now I showed it the way the book does it here with minus high plus low. This minus high is really useless. We don't need to know that. That's why I try to tend to go with just the 4. Like I said, whenever possible, I put it in with pluses. So, but to wrap this up, I just want you to remember, and this is all in the key that is stored on D2L. We could have gone in here and just said plus low, front, spread, and lax, or we could have made these minuses if we wanted to. Plus tense is the same as minus lax and vice versa. Plus ground is minus spread and vice versa. And front is minus back and vice versa. So just remember that as you're looking at them. Okay? Questions on this one? Okay? All right. So just get kind of used to these. There'll probably be a couple things on the test where you'll have to either recognize it or perhaps create the distinctive features thing. All right. Well, that takes care of that one. The other one that I was thinking of is more important. Because this is transcription. We're going to be looking at transcription a bit today. But the thing on this one was most of the consonants you already know. You remember I had that one column that says you know 60% of these already. The thing that was different had to do with which one of the vowel sounds are we going to use. So in this case, C is S, lowercase I in the T. That's C. If I wanted to say sit, how would I have spelled it? Or how would I have transcribed it, I guess I should say. If I wanted to say sit, what would it, this? It would have been the uppercase I. Exactly. It would have been this one, as in kitten. Now, kitten, I want you to remember these, the top and the bottom lines, because otherwise, if those aren't there, it'll look like an L. So I want you to remember that. And we're going to see how you make sure you capture that. And as I said before, some people pronounce words differently. Most of us probably say kitten or kitten, which could have been, which would actually be transcribed a little different. But I run into a lot of people who don't say kitten or kitten. They say kitten or important. You ever heard anybody say important without putting in the T? Oh, that's very important. Once in a while you'll run into it. Those would be glottal stops. That's this thing that looks like a upside, or like a question mark. So kitten is this one. This one would be kitten. And I run into people say that a lot. Kite. Now notice the I sound. This is that diphthong, the first of the diphthongs that we talked about. And if you want to say the sound I, if you say it slowly, I think you will be able to sense you're going from ah to I, or I to E, I. And so a lot of languages that don't have an I spelling would end up doing something like this to make it IE with whatever their letters are. Dog. How most do people say dog? I say dog, so it's D-O-G, dog. Anybody here ever live in New York? Did you? How most people say dog? Huh? Yeah. Dag? Okay. Now, I wouldn't have thought dag so much as I would have thought dog. That's my dog. Now, I would have thought that'd come out of New York, Boston, or some other place like that. And it isn't very common for us. But you can talk to people from different parts of the country, and they're going to say words differently. And when you are transcribing what they say,
What do you transcribe? What they say or what it should have been? What they said, because that's what we're interested in. We're interested in what they said. And who's to say that saying dog is better than saying dog? You go to Boston and say caught. Some people will say caught. They caught the robber. Right? So it's kind of weird, but you got to pay attention to what it is that they're saying. So dog is probably what I would do. Flatly, the a sound in there is that AE combination. One syllable or one symbol, the two of them combined. Unlike this, where we've got two separate syllables going together, or I should say two separate vowels going together. Dog, flatly, flight. Once again, we got that I sound, and it takes these two together. I, door. Anybody spell it differently? Or say it differently? Door?
I thought that was
The oo sound, door. If you use the U, it would be door. So now I'm not sure if anybody would say anything other than maybe dollar. That's a different word. So I think that one's probably going to be a D and an O and an R. There's the two O's because we've only got one sound. Broom. There's another way you might say broom. Anybody ever say broom? I see a lot of people put that on the test. I figured somebody had to say it. But broom doesn't strike me as a very common one. But brooms with a U, just a plain U. Food, the same thing. But then when we get down to this, we've got that U that looks like the upside down omega, and it's the sound, foot. And then there's caught. And as I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, some people in different parts of the country would say caught. So it would be K-A with the A symbol, caught. But it all depends on how you're saying. Rocks. Why don't I have an O? There's an O in rocks. Why didn't I put it there? Yeah. The sound, yes, the O in the spelling comes out sounding like an right? The same thing happens with fox. If I look at this and you didn't put symbols around it, I mean the slashes around it, I would think you were spelling the word fax. Because that's how we would spell it. But if I wanted to see how you would transcribe fox, it's an sound. There is no O sound in there. It's just And you would put it inside those slashes for me to tell the difference. Then there's spare. How else do people put spare? I put it this way. I'm not sure that it's right this way as opposed to the other way I can think about it. Anybody? I'm looking at you. How did you spell it? Oh, well done. We're kindred spirits. Oh, man. I feel sorry for you now that I know you're like me. How did you do it? The E? So spare? Like the regular letter E, right? So I could see that. That's a spare tire. If I was down south, I wouldn't be at all surprised to hear somebody say spare. There might be one other way. So I would have to take that on the test, right? I mean, I could see people saying spare. I could see people saying spare. That's why we put it there, right? Right? Okay. But there's another way we could have done it. And it's kind of close to yours. It's kind of in between the three of us. Spare, spare.
as in the AE together, the A sound, spare. I could see some people saying it that way too. So recognize that while we have a way we would probably say it ourselves and how we would transcribe it, we're always listening to what the other person is saying and then transcribing that. Sound good? Now that I want to hear the rocks rattle. We're all good? All right, very good. And then finally, inspire. I at the end, in at the beginning, inspire. I is right there. And it's the ah and the I together. Okay? All right. So that's the bottom, that's the bottom. We're done with that. We'll come back to this. I will stop for questions. Yes. You know, to me, it doesn't matter. In fact, I think A and a lowercase I makes more sense. You could do it that way. I wouldn't grade you off. But the A and the I going together is the important thing. Because I think I don't think it's I, but you know, what do I know? I come from Illinois. Yes, ma'am. I know you had a question. I saw your hand go up. You're going, I got a question, but no. Okay. Any other questions? So does that answer your question? You could either do either one. I agree with you. Sound wise. Anybody else? Okay, great. So we're about to go into phonetics, but we're going to use Arpad for a minute here because he brought up something interesting the other day. He comes from a Hungarian background, right? Or a Hungarian language background. And so you gave me two words that had an A sound in it, or kind of spelled with an A, right? Pick up your mask for a second. Say those two words kind of slowly. Alma. Alma. So Alma. Okay. And what's the other one? Alu. 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 See, I don't say them like you are. No, I don't. Do you hear a difference in those? Do you hear really a difference? We, probably everybody in the room doesn't hear much of a difference. You would hear a difference, right? You could probably find a word where it is the first one with a couple of letters around it and the second one with the same couple of letters around it, and you would know very quickly that that was a different sound, right? For you, that would be a different phoneme. For us, we probably don't even recognize it. Don't hear the difference. My wife does, I've told you this before, my wife really doesn't hear a difference between R and L. But she's got a whole bunch of consonants that I can never say right. They all sound exactly, well, they don't all sound, but every pair of these things sound exactly the same to me. So they've got this stuff called rice cake, right? Rice cake. It's made out of sweet glutinous rice. But they call it duck, which to me sounds like duck. Duck. Now, I finally learned how to say it. You hear there's kind of like a little bit of an accent there. But most of the time, given this one word, I know what it is. But all of the others, they're just, I can't hear the difference. So it's something for us to recognize that some of our students may not recognize the differences in words like sit and seat, right? But we could probably get back to their language and find out that they've got things, whether it's consonants or vowels, that they recognize as very different. We wouldn't know. Here's one I tried this morning, pal and pal. Hear a difference? Pal and pal. Pal and pal. Pal and pal. You hear a difference? Are they both P's? Does it start with P? Are they all three of them going to be spelled P-A-L? Pal, 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 pal.
I'm trying to make them sound like all P's. It's just that in Korean, for instance, those would be very different words. Just because one has a little bit of aspiration on it. And I don't know, you speak Mandarin?
I speak Cantonese.
Cantonese, do they have a difference like that?
Uh,
No, not?
I'm
Okay.
not sure.
Okay, well, Korean does. And so here's a great story. The number 18 and the F-bomb sound almost exactly the same. Okay? The 18 and the F-bomb. So my wife and I have been living here for a while. We go back to Korea. She's carrying an American passport. She goes up to the immigration desk, and the guy says, "How long have you lived in the U.S.?" F-bomb. What? F-bomb. How long? F-bomb. He finally says, "Do you realize what you're saying?" She had lost her accent just enough to where the 18 years was changing over to F-bomb years. Pretty comical. Never would have happened to me. I just anyway, so it's very different in different languages where the sounds that are there are significantly different. His ahs, a couple of different ones in Hungarian, are much like some of these things that happen in Korean or happen in English when we go sit and seat. Sit and feet, very different things. Okay, well, today we're going to move on a little bit. We're going to move on to the consonants. We've spent most of our time looking at the vowels. We briefly introduced the consonants last the Thursday. Today we're going to look at them a little bit more deeply. This today and Thursday. We're going to get down to the point where we're going to see the IPA characters. We're going to talk about consonants and distinctive features. How many features did we have for a vowel? Every vowel is defined by 4 features. When we get into consonants, they're going to be 3 features, and they're going to be different. They're not going to be even the same from in terms of the 4 that are there. They're going to be 3 different ones. So we're going to get to looking at that. But beforehand, here's the homework for Thursday. Oh, that should say 210, huh? Well, I screwed that up. Anyway, it should be today's 2:8, so this should be 210. I would suggest you reread 99 and 109 after today, just because we've talked about it now. You'll have mental places to put some of that information that may have just gone straight over your head when you read it the first time. I asked everybody to print out homework number 4, part 1 and part 2. Hopefully you brought those today. And then I want you to go into the textbook and do exercise B. There's a whole bunch of them, so I'm interested really in the ones that I have listed there. All right, so you don't have to do them all, but I do want to get B 1, 2, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay. Now that's the main homework. The next one, the thing at the bottom, should be really simple, but it's going to be putting into practice some of the stuff that we talked about in terms of consonants and vowels. But it's also going to show you how, when you get ready to do project part 1, how you're going to go in there and type IPA symbol. All right, and so I'm going to demonstrate how to do that here in just a minute. But reread these pages just for the extra mental hooks you now should have. Hopefully, it'll make more sense. Complete homework number 4, which you already should have printed. If you haven't, you've got it in your email from yesterday. Part 2, we're going to do part 1 in class, hopefully. Exercise B. Now, that's the main homework. I also want one last thing. I'm going to want you to go out to a website. I've got it written right there, ipa.typeit.org/full. And I'm going to demonstrate in a minute how we're going to go in there. And I want you to type your full name, first, middle, and last, the city that you live in, and the state that you live in. And I want you to do that with IPA. Once you've typed it into the spot, I want you just to do a simple copy and paste it into probably a Word document. And then finally, once you've copied it and pasted it into the Word document, save the Word document as a PDF file. Okay, and attach it. Now, I didn't put that there, but I'll explain why the PDF is important in just a minute. Okay, so type your full name, city, and state with IPA, copy and paste it into a Word document. Yeah, you can just print the Word document actually. So you can print it. You don't even have to worry about a PDF this time. Just print it and then attach it to the rest, bring it in with the rest of your homework. Okay. So let's go out and look at this site. And go out here. IPA dot type it dot org/full. And when that comes up, you're going to get something that looks like this. And you're going to see that these are some of the characters that we've already been talking about. There is the uppercase I with the cross on the top and the bottom. We've also got, let's see, there's a glottal stop if we ever need to use that. We've talked about that one. We talked about the sound. Where is it? There it is. The sound. So this has the characters that we're going to need to be able to transcribe what the speaker in the video says. Okay. Now, sometimes you're going to look up there and you're going to go, I don't see a C. There's no C there. If you are trying to type something with a regular standard letter, just do it off of the keyboard. Okay? Don't try to find it up here. Don't try to find something that looks kind of close. Just try to go up there, and if you don't see it, if it's a K, for instance, you go in here, L, J, skips K completely. Well, you're going to just type the K. Okay. Second, don't try to get capital letters. Capital letters don't count with IPA transcription. Notice this thing that looks kind of like a capital B. That is not a capital B. Okay. It's actually a sound. So it is not capital B. So we don't use capitals. It's all just these characters as they are, or standard lowercase characters from your keyboard. Now, the way we're going to do this is I'm going to go in here and show you, let's see, I'm going to put my name. So I know that I need a J, but that J is not enough. I actually need this thing. And that put that little hat over it to make it the J sound. Okay. Now, if your name was Juanita, you'd start with a J, right? What would you start with? Huh? Oh, yeah. Some people might say Juanita, so you would start with a W. That'd be okay. Somebody else might say Juanita how? With an H sound. Once again, I probably said Juanita, so that was perfectly good to say W. But if your name was Juanita and you said it Juanita, then you need to put in the H, right? Okay, so here's my first one. John. What's the next sound? It's a vowel. What do you think is the next sound? Just a regular A, right? Watch, I am not clicking it off of there. I typed it in. What's the next sound? John? What's the next sound? Is there an H in there? No, no H. What is there? An N. Now look at this. I got a whole bunch of stuff in here that looks kind of like N's, but I got a hook here and I got a hook there and I've got a hook that way and I've got a capital N. I said never use capitals. So my regular old plain old N is not there, so I'm going to take it off the keyboard. N. John. All right. What's my middle name? Anybody know? Anyway, Randall. R. Where did I get that R? Where did I get the R? Keyboard. I did, exactly. Now the next sound is an A, right? Randall. So there's the AE. I got to get that from here. What's next? Randall. Next sound. Huh? Randall. How do you spell Randall? R-A-N. And what's after the N? A D. Now notice, I don't have a regular D. That is not the same thing, nor is that. So I'm going to pick off N and D from the keyboard. Randolph. All, what do you think? Anybody? All. Huh? I would say that you could get away with that with me, Randolph, but I think it's a little more like all. Well, I'm going to go in there and do it my way, which is the backward C, and say, you know what, either one of those would have worked. Randolph, L. And then what else? How does Randolph end? With an F. And again, notice that I took the L and the F, the N and the D, the R and the N. That N is wrong. I got something wrong there, so I got to take that back. I must have hit an extra key. Should have just been that. There we go. John, Randolph. Oh, then we get tough. We got to go armor. So I think the next sound is probably an M. I'm going to say schwa, armor. Schwa. So I'm picking the schwa off of there and then the final R, armor. You get the idea? So what I want you to do is take your full name, and I want you to go the way you actually say it. Okay? And I want you to go in there and type it up. The next thing I want you to say is, where do you live? I could go in there and tell you I live in Lindenhurst, so I'd start with an L and then the uppercase I, N, D, etc. across there. But I'm interested in where you live and how you say it. City and state. Name, city, state. And then it's simply a matter of going here like this. Copy it. I'm going to go in. Oh, I'm just going to put it into this document for grins. Put it here for now. But you would copy it into a Word document. Control V. Boom. There it is. Okay. So nothing to it. But I want you to get used to trying it and typing it and doing exactly the way you say your name. Yes.
The state ones, right? Not just the IL.
Yeah. Because if you did IL, you would have to go I-E-L to be able to say it. So yes, I want you to spell out the city, spell out the state. All right. Are we good here? You just go out there and get a little practice. It won't be particular. It's not going to be real difficult. Okay. The more difficult part for you may be taking what you say and representing it in those characters. Okay. All right. So we're going to go back to page 105 in the book. We're looking at IPA for consonants. And I want you to remember that we have a whole bunch of these that we already know. We don't have anything different. They're just regular characters. And that's the way the book presented it. Now, Sebastian last Thursday came up and said, hey, I was looking in a book or Wikipedia or someplace else, and they had other characters there. Is that what you said? It is. See, blame you now. Okay. So one thing you may remember, and I sent you an email that said, make sure you print it,
that has some discrepancies or differences in those things, I would suggest you print that out, fold it in half, and stick it right here in this page. Because there are some differences. You can use the ones that are in your book. I'm perfectly happy with those. But there are some other ways of doing it. Sometimes they'll call this the American Phonetic Association as opposed to the international. First things first, I want to talk about this little guy, the upside down R. That is a perfectly good American English R, like Ralph retches readily rambling down the road. Not the Spanish pero, not the Spanish pero, right? But it's the American, standard American R. Now, many people, particularly if you get into a more advanced phonology class, will require you to use that upside down R. And the reason is this R is actually representative of the R in Spanish, the double R, the trilled R in both Spanish and Russian does the same thing. And so they would use that for the trilled R. And they would then use the upside down one for the regular American R. Since we're teaching English and since that's all we're really interested in, using the regular R is perfectly fine. But you can find the upside down R on ipatypeit.org. You could do that. Here's another one that's very common. It's very common to see people use J instead of Y. It's real easy to remember. If you've ever looked at German, their word for yes is ja, and when they spell it J-A. They don't spell it with a Y, they spell it with a J. So remember that the other thing we had was we had a J with a hat on it. If you want to use that, that's fine. But this is something that you will oftentimes run into. People will use that J instead of a Y, much like they use this. All right. That gets us partway. That's two little discrepancies. Then we had to get over to the consonants that don't look familiar to us. We had theta. It's something like the word thin and thick and thing. And we had the other one that was called ed, which is the TH. It's a little bit different. It's the, mother, brother, father, other, etc. So these two are different, but they both in English are spelled TH. But we've learned to differentiate the two and say them properly. We don't say mother or father. We use a different sound, mother and father. We don't say the, we say the, right? So we've learned that. Our students are going to have to pick that up as they go along. But one way of picking that up is recognizing that we have two different symbols for them. Now, the next one is the sh sound, as in ship or shoot, share, etc. The SH, or as in the end of a word like fish. Okay. We said we can use S with a little hat on it. Perfectly fine with me. Or what has become much more common is to use this symbol that you can see out on IPA next to the S. It's kind of a long, skinny S. And that is used as the symbol as well. Okay? I don't care which one you use, it's perfectly okay, but I want you to realize that you go into a dictionary, you probably won't see this. You're much more likely to see this. Okay? Now, the next one on there would be the CH sound. Oh, sorry, the Z sound, kind of like a ZH. If you took SH and it's sh, you kind of think about it, it's Z and S are very much the same, except I got a lot of rattling in my throat for the Z and it comes out sh. And so this would be the word in measure, azure, fissure, all kinds of J sounds. And in addition to having this Z with a hat over it, it also has this thing that looks like a 3.
or I think this is also a cursive Z. I never learned cursive, so I'm not absolutely sure, but it kind of looks like a 3. You will find that on ipa.org if you need it. Another one is CH. And notice this one. This is 2 symbols combined into one, kind of like that ass sound, but it is a T followed by sh. So I want you to try this with me just to help you remember. I want you to say the ch sound kind of slowly. Ch, ch, chad, chap, cherish. You should, because you're doing that very slowly. You will feel your tongue do almost a T and then roll into that SH. Church, chunk, chap, champ, T followed by the SH. Now, we don't make those 2 sounds independently on purpose, but if you really try it, you will see that it kind of does exactly this. It starts out with the T and rolls in and finishes with the sh, Chicago, for instance. And then we've got another one for the J sound. It's very similar because it does something the same. It does a D and then the J, J. Try it. J, J, judge. You can, if you say it and really try to enunciate it, you'll feel the D rolling into the J at both the front and the back. Judge, judge. And I'm going to explain why we do those like that a little bit later when we're talking about the type of sound that it is. But again, you use which ones you're comfortable with, okay? But recognize that I may actually put these on something because I sometimes do that. So it's a good idea to put that thing inside your book, because sometimes I forget and I use those symbols because I teach a different class where we use the other ones. Okay, but recognize that we've got these changes, or I shouldn't say changes, different ways of writing. Oh, and then we've got, what else we got? Oh, yes, you saw this one. We talked about the NG sound, the sound, as in singer or stinger, or even in a word like finger, where we actually not only have the sound, but we follow it with a G because we're saying it. Finger. And some people, you know, may say singer, but not often around here. But finger would be one like that. Okay. So these are the consonants that we're interested in. So now we've got to look at, oh, there's the glottal stop. We'll talk about that as we go along. There's a couple places we may see that. And so those are the symbols that you don't know. And in the middle there, the 4 that could be shown differently in most books. So you use IPA characters from ipatypeit.org. You use the site to transcribe Project Part 1 into IPA. For IPA symbols, there are regular letters like A, O, E, etc., or S, N, B. Don't try to approximate them from the table that's there. Just type the letter in from the keyboard. The special symbols, the ones that are not our regular Latin characters, those are the ones that you're going to find on ipatypeit.org. And to do it, you just take the mouse up to that and click on it, and it'll put it down in that big square or big empty rectangle. Once you've done that, copy it and paste it into your document. And for this, it's not important. Number 5 is not going to be important for Thursday, but normally you want to go in there and save your document. When you're done with it, save it as a PDF. And the reason is that if you save it as a regular document, you could go from one computing environment, let's say at home, come on campus to print it out, and you get all kinds of goofy things that are hands and pointers, and because they don't represent, the printer doesn't recognize the IPA characters. If you put it in a PDF, however, it is frozen in the format that you put it in there. You turn in or you print the PDF. That way you won't lose those characters. Okay, kind of goofy. But I've seen a lot of people come in and freak out on the day it's due because they've got fingers and squares and little black dots and all kinds of various sundry other things because the printer here didn't recognize what they had done on their computer. Okay, great. So that's how we're going to use that. So you're going to save the final documents PDF. That way you'll have access to it. So that's what we needed to talk about so far with your first part of the project. Now, let's talk about the characteristics that we have for consonants. When we talked about vowels, we said we had the height, we have flatness, we have tenseness, and we have rounding. That's what we had for vowels, right? Well, over here, we've got 3, but they're all different. None of them are the same. We have the place, the part of your mouth or nasal passages or both that are used to say that consonant, the place of articulation, where the sound is made in your mouth, the manner of articulation, which we're going to talk about on Thursday. And then we've got this idea of voicing. Plus or minus, plus or minus, plus or minus. Just like they were. The difference is we're looking for different characteristics. Okay? Now, let's take a look at voicing first, because voicing is maybe the easiest one, because you've got a built-in cheat sheet for this. I want you to just say the sound of the letter S. But I want you to pinch right here at your vocal cords, right where your Adam's apple would be. And I want you to just make the S sound. But you got to hold your neck, otherwise you'll miss it. What do you feel down here? Anything? There should be nothing. It just sits there. And all you're hearing is the air hissing through up here in the front of your mouth. Now I want you to change that. And I want you now to say the Z sound as in buzz. What do you feel now? A lot of vibration in here. The first of those sounds, the is considered or is called voiceless or not voiced. The second one, where we've got the vibration, or and a whole bunch of other ones, those are called voiced sounds, or they would be marked as plus voice. Okay? Now, here's a thought for you. Why didn't we have to deal with voice for the vowels? The simple reason is all English vowels are voiced. So we have no voiceless vowels to go in there and mark as voiceless. So it would just be superfluous to have to put down a voicing characteristic when we know if it's a vowel, all of the vowels are voiced. Okay? All right. So voicing is easy. You can take every sound and all you do is make the consonant sound. And if it is down here and rattles, it's voiced. Let's take the J sound, as in judge. Ju, 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 ju. And then take this one that's very similar, although you may never have thought about it. The ch is voiceless. The j is voiced. Okay? We're going to see that more and more as we go along. It's going to be a very important characteristic in some places. So, place of articulation, the manner of articulation, which we'll talk about, and voicing, which we've already talked about. Let's now talk about Bubba. My buddy Bubba. Does anybody here know the song Bubba Shot the Jukebox? Ah, you see, I had somebody who knew that song a couple of years ago. It was my favorite. If nobody knows Bubba Shot. Anyway, this is Bubba, and he is our model today. We've already talked about him a little bit. This glottis is where your vocal cords are. That is the place that you feel vibrating when you have a voiced sound. Go, 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 go. And it's the place that does not vibrate when you have a voiceless sound. The air just passes right through it. No vibration. It's up into the pharynx and the uvula. We don't care too much about those in English. Other languages, like Semitic languages, deal with those a lot. We are most interested at the velum. That's the soft palate in the back. Good, 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 good. And then we've got the palate up here where we have things like and all kinds of sounds are made right there with the use of the hard palate. We've got some alveolar sounds. Oh, where your tongue is right up above your back, up above your top teeth. There's a ridge there, a bony ridge, you'll feel it. Run your tongue through there. That's the alveolar ridge. And so things like N and T and D and L are all made right there with your tongue either touching or being very close to the alveolar ridge. Then we've got the teeth. We're not going to talk about directly with the teeth very much for English, but we do have some sounds that we make in between the teeth. You'll remember those, right? What are they? And the TH sounds. Now, some people here actually make it more on the back of their upper teeth, like other people actually have their tongue sticking out between their teeth a little bit. Both of them are the same. We're going to call those interdentals, between the teeth. And then the next thing out is we're going to have labiodentals. Dental meaning teeth, labia meaning lips. And so labiodental is going to be those places where I use my top teeth and my lower lip to say F and V. Those are labiodentals. Some of your students are going to have a hard time with those because they can't say the V's or they can't say F's. And then we're going to come all the way out here. Let's see, we've got the interdentals, the labiodentals. Now we're going to get to bilabial. Bi means two, and the labial means lips. So these are going to be things made with both lips. B, P, whoa, W too. Whoa, whoa, whoa. I'll say. Now, your tongue plays a role in many of these. Oftentimes you'll either hear some things like which shut the airflow off and then pop open. We're going to talk about that as one manner. Another manner is where all you hear is the friction, like in and you're hearing the friction of the air going across some surface. In other cases, closed and pop wide open. But we're going to talk about place of articulation. What I want you to do is think about these. First, lips. We've got two places on the lips. One of those is the labiodental, which means what? Labiodental? Diana. Which lip? Which tooth? All the top teeth, right? Right. So it's a labiodental. And then we've got the bilabials. Bilabial means what? Two lips. And so we actually close it off. In that case, we don't actually blow it out. The air comes out through our nose. But nonetheless, we've got labiodental and we've got bilabial. Those are important. Then we've got the teeth involved. We're going to call them interdentals, because the book does. But that is, interdental means what? Yes. Between the teeth, right? Your tongue comes out between your teeth. Exactly correct. Those are interdentals. Then we've got dentals. I already mentioned a little bit. Some people just is really back behind their teeth. Like when you say, when somebody uses Spanish and they talk about a wedding and it's a boda. It's not really a boda, it's boda, right? And so that's actually a dental sound. And then we've got the alveolar ridge. We call these sounds alveolars. And I've mentioned a number of them. There's a whole slew of them right up there. And mostly what you're hearing is either a stop of the airflow with your tongue on your upper alveolar ridge, or you hear friction going through there. Alveopalatal, we're not going to worry about sometimes. Some books will break it out that way. Palatal, the hard palate or the roof of your mouth, the hard roof of your mouth. Those are called palatals. The velum, the soft palate in the back. Good. Good. Some languages have uvulars and pharyngeal sounds. We don't have to deal with those. And then we've got the glottis all the way down here. Okay, so I'm going to bring this slide back up when you do another exercise in a minute. But voicing, voiced consonants have vibration of the vocal cords. Unvoiced consonants have no vibration. Most consonants come in pairs, where you've got a voiced one and an unvoiced one. B and P, for instance. B and T. Most consonants have voiced and unvoiced pairs, not all. And then finally, don't forget this one. We don't have to specify a characteristic for vowels, because for voicing on vowels, because they're all voiced. All right. So here's what I'd like you to do. I would like you to take out the first of the documents that I gave you. At the top, it should say homework number 4, consonant matrix part 1. Okay? Anybody not have it? Didn't bring it? Okay, we got 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, very good. We'll take that out. Only got 6. We're going to ration them. Oh, man. There you go. Pass that one over. You got yours. Very good. Later, you may need to make. Oh, no, yours was. That was fine. It looks like it was kind of water. But okay, you got yours. You're good. Okay, there we go. There we go. That's into the back. Got this electronic version. Electronic stage 3. Very good. Now, I want you to work with somebody else. I'm going to give you 10 minutes to do this. Then I'm going to give you the key for it. But what I want you to do is work with somebody near you somehow. You could turn around, you could turn around. If we have to get 3, we might have to get, oh, there's 2 and 2 and 2 and 2. Oh, man, life is good when it works out. Okay. And all I want you to do is go into that very first column underneath the word place. And I want you to test that sound by making that sound and say, where is it happening? The list of things, the list of places that it might happen are right there. Labiodental, bilabial, interdental, alveolar, palatal, or glottal. Okay? And I want you to go way over into the far right-hand column and put a Y or an N if it's voiced or not voiced. Yes, if it's voiced, N if it is not. So I'm going to help you with the first one. Where is the sound B made? B, b, b. The lips, it's a bilabial, right? So the first one is going to be bilabial. And the test for voicing, it rattles, right? It vibrates. So way over on the right-hand side, you'd also put a Y. The next one is P. Where's P made? Both lips again, it's a bilabial. No vibration. So what would you put in the right column? No, exactly. So I'm going to give you a few minutes. Go ahead and get started. Work with the person next to you if you can. That will be good. If you feel like, oh, I'm just so introverted and I can't stand to work with other people, that's okay too. I don't want to share my wisdom. Oh, you need one? There you go. The one that says part one, say part two for a few minutes. Which one?
All right. Right. And then, yeah. There's definitely vibration there. Yeah. There's no congestion on your phone. I'm not sure if we're supposed to. Yeah, yeah. Dental tooth. That's a little silver. So. And then.
Well, I was hoping you would not, but if you're trying to do it with your mouth so that you build your teeth here. later on. Try to find another top stuff and use it for something else. Yeah, so you're doing this one first. Fire rate, that, and come down to the all of it. And
Yeah.
that, well, it's not the whole property line, it's right at the front. Right at the gate. Yeah, that bridge.
You're using your maybe your palm.
It is. That, now what's the difference?
There's two Fs. Yeah, the one after there's like one was,
Okay. That's the way, work your way down through that.
and then you put that fruit to go, then and then,
Okay, so here's what I'd like you to do, since we're kind of running out of time. We don't have time to actually finish this, but I would like you to go ahead and finish that when you get a chance out of here. Now, I will tell you, and I don't want you to look this up. Looking it up does not meet the purpose. I want you to do this with your mouth and sense where these things are happening. Okay, I know a lot of people looked into the book, and that's okay. So that's like in the city. And we all agreed you're all city people, right? Okay, so, oh, my wife didn't know what a sow was either, so I guess you're okay. She grew up on a farm. Anyway, but nonetheless, if you look at part 2, or yeah, at the beginning of part 2, it has where you should be sensing those items here. Okay, so don't use this first. Use your mouth and try to sense where it is. Then once you've done that, go through with this list and fix it. At the same time, when you see that this says, oh, this is alveolar, then go out there and make a T sound. Ah, that's why it's an alveolar. Or this is a palatal sound. Oh, that's why the air is rushing around up here on my palate. But test it out. Because what you want to do is you want to walk into the test and have it down pat by the fact that you could do these all with your mouth and know exactly where those things are. Okay? So finish off part 1, go in there and take out the sheet for part 2 and see and correct your first answers, and then test it out all the way down that list so that you begin to sense where these sounds are being made. And then I'm not even going to give you the key at the moment for voicing, because that one's a freebie. That one's like really easy. So you can just do the voicing thing on your own. Part 2, I think, let me see something. don't do part 2 yet. Use part 2 to fix up your part 1. Don't worry about turning it in on Thursday, because I haven't told you about the manner of articulation. That was what I wanted you to do with homework for part 2, but don't do it at all. Just do part 1. We will talk about part 2 when you come in, but use this as the key to your part 1 and then practice it a little bit. Okay? And I will change if you haven't done the PowerPoint, give me a few minutes. I'm going to go ahead and change the PowerPoint and take doing part 2 off of the homework part. Okay? So you've got this and you've got the IPA type it exercise for Thursday. And I got done almost on time. What's a minute? What's a minute between friends? Come on. Anyway, you guys have a good day. I'll see you Thursday. I put it down. Put you down already. What a guy. What a guy. Uh-huh. Yes. Yeah. Well, I know some of the Slavic languages use those. Interesting.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, some Polish guy was probably part of the team. The guy who invented English was drunk that day, and they had a Polish guy in there to help him with some characters.
And that is because my daughter is learning a lot of this phonics and all this stuff. Last weekend, I was like, guess what I learned? And she was telling me, Mommy, this word for this sound the same, but it doesn't. I was like, oh, what are you doing?
See, and they know, but most of the time they can't explain it anyway. But yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
This is for homework. Part 1.
Yes. So go ahead and use, this part.
Oh,
Just putting into place
from this.
and this. You're on the right path. Yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, yes. Almost.
Okay, and then, yeah, so that goes here.
That goes there, and then on, I'm going to change the homework assignment so that we'll do what's going on in here, but write it out here along this column, not in here, because we're going to use these cells for part 2. Okay? You sure?
Yeah, just, I have to study.
Oh, yes.
Radial dental. I just need to.
I think you're the only one in the class. Everybody has to do it.
Yeah, we're a typing thing. My name is actually spelled with them. But I just double check my mom. So I make sure.
I don't even worry about the accents for now. We're just going to go ahead on with the, because RPod, is your RPod got? No, don't worry about that. I'm going to be giving you an on thing and